Well, hello, folks out there on YouTube land. Got a big show lined up for you. Let's get right on into it. All right, yeah, the war has begun, it appears to me. SEC versus Big Ten. This probably doesn't shock you. As you know, the SEC and Big Ten kind of merged together back in February in meetings. They had kind of taken over the college football playoff. Really, it's up to them. They have all the voting rights moving from 2026 forward on the setup, how many teams are going to be in it, all of those sorts of things. And all they've got to do is listen to the Big 12 and ACC. And they pretty much told those two conferences, you can either go along or we're going to leave. And we'll just combine forces and just create our own college football playoff. So the ACC and Big 12 didn't have much choice. That has not set well with a lot of people. And there's been an effort to drive a wedge between the two major conferences, the Power Two. And I'm not very surprised by this at all. You're going to start seeing a lot of it, especially over the 5+11, the 4-4-2-2-1, which we've talked a lot about. But you're going to see a lot of people pushing these two conferences apart, and it's probably going to work. And the way they're going to do this is they're going to try to pressure the SEC to go to 9 conference games, because the Big Ten already does that. And if they don't go to 9 games, I think pretty much everybody knows with 16 teams in the college football playoff, the SEC is going to get the most teams in every year, because the truth is the SEC is stronger from top to bottom than the Big Ten, and certainly the ACC and the Big 12. They're just tougher at the bottom, and that frustrates folks because they want everything the same, but they like the fact the SEC beats up on each other. They're happy about that, but they don't want them having that advantage of having an 8-game conference schedule, because they will get more teams in the playoff. Last year, for example, they would have gotten 6 in instead of just the 3. Now, granted, that's because they moved to 16. But the Big Ten would have gotten no more in. They had 4 in, and that's what it would have been even if we'd gone to 16. And that's because the Big Ten is really strong at the top, but at the bottom half, they're weak. You know, they've got teams that they don't even sweat. Ohio State's got 3 or 4 games they don't even think about. And you can't do that in the SEC, because right now, I mean, the teams that are struggling, I mean, the Auburn Tigers have had a losing record the last 2 or 3 years. They are not an easy win. Texas A&M has been kind of middle of the road. That's a very talented team. Oklahoma has been struggling. They're loaded with talent. And even Vanderbilt, who's typically our worst team, they're good now all of a sudden. So you're going to be seeing a lot of folks pushing the SEC and trying to drive the Big Ten and the SEC into a fight over this. And it could easily happen because the Big Ten has as much power as the SEC. They can decide how this goes, 5-11, 4-4-2-1. And the more Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey do this, the better the other conferences are going to like it. And here's an article in USA Today by Blake Topmeyer. If SEC wants more college football playoff respect, it's time to dump cupcake games. And it says the SEC keeps finding new reasons to not add its 9th game, conference game. It says the latest excuse, many SEC coaches feel loath to welcome a 9th conference game without first knowing the college football playoff format for 2026 and beyond. He said, the writer says, what's next? No 9th SEC game until there's peace in the Middle East? And here it compares TCU and Baylor. It says Alabama, Florida, and South Carolina will play 10 regular season games against Power 4 opponents. The SEC's other teams will play 8 or 9 games against Power foes. But TCU and Baylor will play a nation-leading 11 games against Power 4 competition. That's because TCU and Baylor are in a much easier conference. Dadgum. I mean, you got to be kidding me.
You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
Their weak opponents are not going to be Kentucky, Auburn, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt. It won't be like that. They're going to be playing some cupcakes in their conference. Indiana played 9 Big Ten games. 9. You know how many top 25 teams they played? 1. And it was Ohio State, and they whooped them. Indiana had like the 100th toughest schedule in the country. How do you pull that off being in the Big Ten? But they did. He also says in here, speaking about the 3 teams that got pushed out, Ole Miss, Alabama. And Alabama would have got in, but Clemson got in because they won the conference, even though they were rated below where Alabama was. And South Carolina also got a little bit creaked, even though they had beaten Clemson head-to-head. And he says, and yet the SEC's 3-loss also-rans could have tempted the committee more if they played and won another conference game, or at least played and won an additional game against a Power 4. South Carolina beat Clemson, and they played in the SEC. They were 9-3, and they didn't come close to getting in. Clemson got in and kicked Alabama out, even though Alabama was ranked, like I say, they were ranked way better. So it's about wins and losses. That committee didn't take strength of schedule into a whole lot of account. Now, again, had it been a 16-team college football playoff, all 3 of those teams would have gotten in. So that's why, like I say, I think Sankey's starting to see the forest for the trees, that playing that 9th game is only going to hurt the SEC. It's going to knock teams out of the conference, out of the playoff, and cost the conference a lot of money. And the coaches are not going to do it. They've already said, we're not going to do it unless you really reward us with something significant, because they know it'll get them fired. And the writer says the SEC keeps floating the myth that the playoff committee does not respect strength of schedule. Says that's untrue. Says Indiana won 11 games last season, but the Hoosiers' soft schedule meant Indiana ranked behind 4 other at-large qualifiers that won fewer games. Well, and again, that is a unique situation because Indiana had a schedule that you just couldn't even believe. And I'm not saying Indiana was a bad team. They weren't. They were a pretty darn good team. They just didn't play anybody. And then here he gets to the reality. It says, I can understand the SEC's reluctance to add a 9th conference game. Another league game would guarantee another loss to half the conference. Those additional losses would hinder playoff pursuits across half the league. But wait a minute. Why would it hinder it if you say strength of schedule is so important and that the committee would take that into account? They're playing another SEC game. Why would that hinder it? But right there, he says exactly what we all know. Those additional losses would hinder playoff pursuits across half the league. Ta-da. Now, in the comment section yesterday, after I did the latest video on this, had a very interesting question. Wanted to know what would happen if the Big Ten won't agree with the 5+11, which the other conferences are all in favor of. Pretty much, Greg Sankey came out and said that the other day on the Dan Patrick Show, and I showed you that clip. He just wants the top 16. Not the 5+11, but 5+11 is way closer than the 4-4-2-1. So I don't have an answer for that. If the Big Ten says, absolutely, we're not doing the 5+11, and they've got just as much power as the SEC equally, and SEC wants 5+11, and the other 2 conferences say, we also want 5+11, what's going to give? And Petiti can sit there and go, well, you've got to go to 9-game conference schedule or we won't agree to it. And the SEC says, we're not going to do that. It comes to a head. Somebody's got to give. And who will that be? Now, granted, if the SEC is in solidarity with the other 2 Power 4 conferences, you would think the Big Ten would give in to that. But they don't have to. Petiti could just say no. And I don't know how they reconcile that. I really don't. So that was a very interesting question. Now we're going to get into the politics of money and power. And this is a story in the Clemson Insider. It says, we are not stupid, ESPN. And it talks about the fact that Sankey came in and gave everybody a 7-page packet to the media explaining why the teams in the SEC have such a harder schedule and that the teams in the SEC are ranked so much higher in the power index. And if you've not seen that, here it is. Let me kind of enlarge this so you can see it better. All right, here's your rankings. Texas is number 1, Georgia's number 2, Alabama's number 3, Ohio State's 4, Penn State, Oregon, you can see all down the line, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Miami. Got Tennessee 10th, which is a little bit surprising given the NICO IAMALEAVA situation. There's Clemson at 11, and you can see there's a ton of SEC. Here's 5 in a row SEC teams before you finally get to a Big Ten, and then Florida, etc. Now, the writer didn't appreciate this power index. He says, let's just say the hype machine is already beginning. ESPN's so-called FPI rankings has 11 SEC teams in its top 18. So that's right, 11 of the top 18 are SEC foes. And here it talks about the 3-loss teams that didn't get into the 12-team playoff. Now, here's why that matters. ESPN has the TV rights for the SEC. Now, they also have the TV rights for the ACC, so you would think they'd want to rank them up there too. But the reality is the ACC feels very unappreciated from ESPN, and they kind of feel like they're Jan Brady and the SEC is Marcia.
Marcia.
Yeah, and there's some truth to that. There is. ESPN's going to take care of the SEC better than they do the ACC. And it's not hard to do either, because when it comes to viewership, SEC games get way bigger ratings than the ACC. It's just a fact. Now, you have some teams in the ACC that get really good ratings, the Clemsons, the Florida States, etc. But the SEC's loaded with big-time names, and they're going to get the views.
Logical.
So, of course, ESPN's going to take care of their cash cow. And they aren't happy with the rankings. Says Alabama is number 3. Why? I'm sure he talks about, you got to be talking about Tennessee in here, because I was surprised they were putting it 10th. Oh, they're complaining about Clemson being at 11, having the number 1 quarterback for Heisman in Cade Klubnik. And then it says Auburn's number 14, South Carolina's number 15. You're not happy about that. And he says that's the 8th and 9th place teams in the SEC deserve to be in the wants to know why they deserve to be in the conversation for a college football playoff. And it's because Auburn and South Carolina, well, first of all, Auburn's loaded with talent. I have no idea how they've had these losing seasons. It's insane. They've just had such bad play at quarterback. Whereas South Carolina is kind of the opposite of that. They've had a good defense, but, of course, they've got Lenore Sellers, who I think he is the dark horse to win the Heisman. And at the end here, he says, stop thinking we are stupid, SEC. Stop thinking we are stupid, ESPN.
You don't own me. I decide, okay? I say who, I say when, I say who.
I refuse to spend the next 3 days fighting with you. I said I was sorry. I meant it.
Everybody knows ESPN is paying the college football playoff. Everybody knows ESPN is paying the SEC a lot of money. We see it. He says it's obvious ESPN wants more SEC teams in the playoffs so they can get more television revenue and make as much money as possible so it can pay huge for its television deal with the SEC. And those rankings do matter, because even, look, if you start off way up, you've got to lose games to fall. Whereas if you're down in the bottom, you've got to win a bunch of games just to get up where they are. So it's always better to start off on top with the rankings if you want to end up there. And I would think ESPN probably does put their thumb on the scale a little bit. Just like I'm sure Fox Sports will be ranking the Big Ten teams higher. And there's one other story I want to tell you about that's happening that is actually pretty interesting. Now, Tennessee has been accused of having referees on their side in some games, which you know my brother Chilmont, who comes on the show from time to time, would completely disagree with that. But there is a video that has gone viral that kind of makes it look like Tennessee might very well have zebras on their side.
Police in Tennessee are searching for a pet zebra. Cameras captured the zebra as it escaped from its owner's home. Police were forced to briefly shut down a neighboring highway after the striped animal gave drivers quite a shock after it bolted through traffic at a busy intersection. And as of now, this zebra remains on the run. So keep an eye out if you're down that way. And yes, apparently in Tennessee, it is legal to have a pet zebra with no additional papers.
Did you just look that up?
I did look it up. I had to know. I'm like, is this okay? Do we regularly have pet zebras in Tennessee?
Could you imagine?
Yep. So it could be true. And as you know, even look back just a couple years ago, the Alabama-Tennessee game, there were some accusations that Tennessee had some help from the referees.
Normally, I wouldn't pull for Tennessee if they was playing Iraq. It's just not in my nature. But going forward, I hope Tennessee don't lose a ball game. Because I want so bad for Tennessee to beat Georgia in whatever fashion they have to do it. I don't care if it's bad, good, ugly, in a hurry. I don't care. All right, beat Georgia, get your ass to Atlanta. Get your ass to Atlanta with a different officiating crew. The officiating crew determined the outcome of that ball game 100%. Alabama was never leaving Neyland Stadium with a win. They was not going to have it. That ain't a close ball game. That is not a close ball game without that officiating crew whatsoever.
Yeah. So this zebra sighting, that's not a good look for Tennessee. I mean, it's, might be caught red-handed on this one. And there was another Alabama guy from that game that wasn't happy either, and he kind of felt like the officials weren't necessarily being fair.
There's not a lot that I like. I'm not one of those people who every time a team loses, it's the ref's fault. There's a lot of Alabama fans hollering that stuff right now. I'm not one of them. But I will say they made some errors in their calls. That's all I'm going to say. There were errors that went against Alabama that should not have went against us.
Yeah, so I think Tennessee's got some explaining to do because, you know, this video evidence out there that we've got pet zebras is not going to sit well with some of the folks in the SEC that we have to play every year because they're probably going to be able to use this against us. Hopefully we won't have to vacate that win in 2022. I mean, this is pretty bad evidence, though, I got to admit. Anyway, if you like this content, be sure to hit that like button. Let's continue to cover all these big college sports stories. If you've not subscribed, boom, 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 hit that little button right there. It will not cost you a dime. Help you get my videos. And right over here is the most recent video. YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. And we'll see you next time on Sports Talk J. Dadgum zebra.
Are you kidding me? Where are we at in society today? Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!